Brett Kavanaugh, he is sitting through these Supreme Court hearings. And while this is happening, he's getting, look, there's a lot of politicians just grandstanding. Like, what's the guy's name? Cory Booker? Booker? I'm screwing up his last name. Wow, how dumb am I? He was going on and on about, like, progressive issues, and I'm just thinking, like, I don't know what any of this has to do with whether or not Kavanaugh is going to uphold the Constitution and follow the law. Right? It seems like there's a lot of people who are just grandstanding, like, I'm a Republican, so, we gotta believe in all these things, and will you defend the Constitution? And the Democrats are like, but what about progressive values? And, and I'm sitting here, like, rolling my eyes. But I'll tell you what I really love is that while this hearing is on, every 5 minutes you hear someone start screaming at the top of their lungs, and then they get, like, carried out. And it's just, like, nonstop. It's just, it's amazing. And I tweeted about it, and it was a mixed reaction. There were a lot of people who were, like, agreeing with me that it is awesome, and I'll explain why. It's absolutely fantastic, and I'm so happy. I feel great joy every time I hear those shrieks. But there were some people like, but they're doing disruptive, and they have no logic, and we shouldn't allow this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no. We should allow this. I got the story from USA Today. It's an op-ed, and it says, Brett Kavanaugh Supreme Court hearing protests are as American as apple pie. God damn it, that is true. And I'll read about what this guy, I don't know, this Stephen Petro, we'll read what he says, but you know what I love about America? This is a country where the poorest, weakest individual, you could be lying in the street in the gutter, you could come from the streets and have nothing to your name, and you can walk right up to the richest, wealthiest, and most powerful person in the country, a politician, the president, and you can say, fuck you. And they can't do anything about it. Look, you walk up to the president and start screaming at him, they might tell you to get away, because people have a right to feel secure, and there are laws, for sure. But the point I'm trying to make is, there are countries where you can walk up to a politician and say something like, let's look at Thailand. They have lèse-majesté laws. You know what that means? It means even if you condemn language that insults the royal family, but you repeat it, you're guilty, okay? So I was in Thailand, and there were people, okay, if you say something like, I can't even say it on here because if I want to go to Thailand, right? If I say something that could be offensive to the royal family on this video, in America, if I go to Thailand, they can say, hey, you committed a crime, for insulting the royal family. Admittedly, I will say this too. I did a documentary in Thailand. King Bhumibol was like, I don't know a lot about Thai history, but I do know that everybody loved that dude. And the research we did, that guy was awesome. Rest in peace. He seemed like a really amazing guy. So basically, I'm in Thailand, and someone made a disparaging comment about the royal family, and people were shocked that it was said because you'll get arrested for it. And someone else was like, I can't believe so-and-so said X. Oh my God. Because simply by repeating it, saying it was wrong or whatever, they had also committed the crime. I think that's whack. I like the fact that in the United States, I can sit here all day and night and say, Barack Obama was a guy who killed a bunch of Americans, and I don't like that. I think he's a bad person in a lot of ways. And Donald Trump also signed off on a commando raid in Yemen, which resulted in the killing of an 8-year-old girl, and then missile strike Syria, did a weapons deal with Saudi Arabia, and is contributing to more drone strikes in countries we're not at war with. And I can flat out say, fuck the politicians, fuck Obama, fuck Trump, fuck Hillary Clinton, George W. Bush, they can all rot in hell for all I care, and ain't nobody can do anything about it. How awesome is that? That's great, right? So here we have Brett Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court, the highest court in all the land. And because we're America, a bunch of angry people can stand up and scream at the top of their lungs, and the elite politicians of this country have to sit there with a smile on their face. I love it. I absolutely love it. Look, I don't agree with a lot of what the protesters are saying because I don't know what they're saying. I'm watching these the news on this, and I can't hear anything. I did hear someone yell like hypocrites over and over again, and I'm like, well, I don't know why this man is yelling hypocrite. Personally, I do think politicians are hypocrites. I think they're liars, and for the most part, I can name 2 politicians I like. I can, 2 of them on one hand. Bernie Sanders, because I think he's honest. I think he stands up for what he believes in. Unfortunately, I do feel he's a little weak, right? So that's where it's like Bernie Sanders, I really like him, but man. And then Rand Paul, because Rand Paul also stands up for what he believes in. I just kind of don't agree with a lot of his policy decisions and things like that. But I look at these 2 guys, and admittedly, it's not like I follow them every day and I know exactly what they're doing all the time, but I know that Rand has done some pretty amazing things. like filibusters for really long periods of time. I know that Bernie Sanders has remained honest and consistent for the most part. There's been some slip-ups where I shake my head saying, Bernie, what are you doing? But those are like the only politicians I actually like. You know, like Marco Rubio acting like he didn't know who Alex Jones was. Come on, man. Look, you don't have to like Alex Jones, but pretending like you don't know who he is, okay, sure, maybe it's possible Rubio didn't know who he was, but come on, man. We've had all this news. You're literally at a hearing with Twitter and Facebook, partly because Alex Jones was mass banned and people have been talking about this and Trump was tweeting about it, all right? So anyway, let's take a look at what this opinion contributor coordinator says about these protests. Mob rule at Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court nomination hearing and at UNC Chapel Hill Silent Sam statue removal is actually civil disobedience. Well, hold on. Removing a statue I disagree with. That's destroying public property, okay? But let's see why he says that. All right, well, he says, I'm very sorry to tell Senator John Cornyn that the protesters who disrupted the opening day of Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings are not guilty of mob rule, as he said on Tuesday. Ditto to the University of North Carolina leaders who called mob rule on those who toppled Silent Sam. The Confederate statue had stood front and center on the Chapel Hill campus since 1913. Both are actually contemporary examples of civil obedience. I think he means civil disobedience, a form of resistance that has its roots deep in the American experience. Civil disobedience is, in fact, as American as apple pie. Now, I'm going to stop here and say, first of all, hold on. I don't know exactly what was said from Cornyn about mob rule, but sure, I think a bunch of angry people yelling things and disrupting an event could be described as mob rule, yeah. I think they're allowed to do it, and I'm glad that people are allowed to go to, like, this is amazing, okay? A lot of people don't know this. You can go to Capitol Hill, you can just walk in. No one can stop you. It's public. It's amazing that this court, they're nominating, Brett Kavanaugh's nominated, and they're doing this confirmation hearing. This is the most powerful court in the country. The rules, the precedent specifically, set by the Supreme Court will determine how law enforcement handles cases for over 300 million people, the amount of power in this room. And random people can stand up and scream, go fuck yourself. I think that's fantastic. If a mob of people started screaming and shutting things down, I'd also call that mob rule. It doesn't mean it's not free speech. There are problems with it for sure, but these people are being removed, okay? So it's like, yes, you can carry on your meeting. These people are disrupting, so they will get removed, but they got to walk in, they got to do their thing, and they're not going to get arrested. At least I'm assuming they're not getting arrested for it. I hope they're not getting arrested for it. Now, hold on. The Confederate statue removal, that's not civil disobedience. That was destruction of public property. And the problem with this, and I disagree, look, I'm not a fan of Confederate statues. I do think it's important to, like, if you want to take the statue down, I think a good compromise is to put the statue in a museum and replace the statue with a memorial, like explaining what happened and why the statue was removed, and just like do a big thing, like a big plaque or something. Those who forget the past, are doomed to repeat it. So just tearing down a statue because we don't like our past is not smart. I do think it would be great to put them in museums because they are a symbol of the past, and that's what museums are for, but then to keep something there so we can all remember. That way you kind of have the people saying it's about history and it's about heritage. It's like, okay, great, we'll keep a memorial there for the memory of those who are lost while recognizing that our culture has changed and we never want to forget what was happened for the good or the bad. And then we're going to put the statue in a museum. That's like a win. Now the history people get like two things. You get a statue in a museum and a memorial. And the people who don't like the statue and what it symbolizes get a plaque saying, hey man, there was some bad stuff associated with the history and we didn't want to have a statue up for it. Where's the reason? But anyway, the point I'm making is that's not civil disobedience. You know, the public decides they want to do something. You can't just destroy it because now you're going against the people. So while the civil disobedience is usually like disrupting a roadway, blocking doors, putting padlocks on doors and things like that, things that are easily reversible for the most part. As, they're talking about putting the statue back up. It's going to take a couple more months, but that's not civil disobedience. That was just destroying public property. So, he goes on to talk about the Boston Tea Party, and for the most part, I gotta admit, I don't really care about this guy's opinion. I just wanted to talk about the issue, but we'll find his conclusion here. The protesters in the Senate hearing voicing their opposition to having 42,000 pages of documents delivered so late that the senators could not possibly review them before questioning began. Their action, however, was not simply an overnight reaction. It was steeped and planned in their ideological opposition to Kavanaugh, especially on issues like abortion access, LGBTQ rights, and voting rights. With no established mode of redress for that wrong, the protesters did what generations of principled Americans have done. They spoke up. Civil rights leader Reverend William Barber II once told me forcefully that civility cannot mean just stand down, or that you just pray, or you don't be disruptive. I couldn't agree more, after all. If those Bostonians had stayed polite, too civil to be disruptive, we might have remained a colony. Well, I can't speak for all the maybes and whatnots, but what I can say is I like protest. I love the fact that I live in a country where people can shut down a road. Yes, I understand. It sucks for the people who are in that road and can't drive anymore. And sometimes it causes problems for a lot of people. But I imagine the alternative. A despot, dictatorial type government that's going to say, I don't care what your grievance is. We're going to lock you up for opposing us. The problem with that is imagine if our system was the way it was. Elected officials, except there was no free speech. All right, then someone would get in office and be like, that guy's yelling, get rid of him. Give him, bring him to the gallows. I don't like that. I like the idea, there's a balance, right? If there's too many people forming a mob and destroying property and going crazy, well, that's not free speech. That's property destruction, vandalism, it's a riot. And yes, when crowds get too big, things can get really bad and can shut you down. At the same time, the other extreme end is a militaristic dictatorship that says the government is right and will always be right, and anyone who dares say otherwise is going to get, the hard end of the stick. And that sucks. So while we can be annoyed often by people who don't know what they're talking about, are yelling things you can't even understand, yes, you take the good with the bad. I'd rather be in the middle, knowing that I don't know what these people are saying. I agree with maybe some of them and don't with many of them. But I applaud them for standing up, going, it takes a lot of guts to go into a Supreme Court confirmation hearing and demand to be heard. And that's incredible. It doesn't mean they're right. It doesn't mean that their ideas are good. But it just means that there are people who are willing to stand up for what they believe in this country. And it's a symbol that in this country, the most powerful, we're talking about the federal government and the most powerful court in the country can do nothing to stop you from standing up and saying, I don't like you, and here's why. You're wrong, and you must be stopped. And that's great. Personally, I don't think the protests are going to be too effective, but I do take pride in what it symbolizes. Seriously, when I'm sitting here watching this, I'm laughing. Not laughing at the protesters. I'm laughing at how awesome it is, because I have been to these countries. I have been to countries where people have been threatened with arrest and prosecution for making jokes, okay? And that's not a country I ever want to live in. And that's why I believe in free speech, and that's why I love this country. And that's why I respect the people who stand up and scream at the top of their lungs at this confirmation hearing, because this is America, goddammit. And in America, the poorest, weakest person, no matter what you look like or where you're from, you can walk right up to the richest oligarch, the richest oil baron with his fancy coat and his cane, and you can look in the eyes and say, fuck you, and you can't do shit about it. And there are so many countries where the rich man will be like, police, destroy him and I'll bribe you. And yes, there's recourse for some of these rich assholes and elitists in power. They can do things behind the scenes. But legally speaking, the government cannot stop you from giving the middle finger to the powerful elitist assholes who run this country. And that is one of the greatest things. And that's why it is part of the First Amendment, because it's that important. Anyway, thanks for hanging out. I'm going to get out of here. More videos coming up tomorrow on the main channel at 4 p.m. I'll see you guys then.